You know, it's kind of wild when you think about it. How does that extra bagel or that soda you had with lunch actually turn into body fat? Well, it's not magic. It's an ancient and honestly an incredibly efficient factory that's running inside your own cells. So let's pull back the curtain on this process. Scientists have a fancy name for it, of course, de novo lipogenesis, which really just means making fat from scratch. And this fat factory, it can go into absolute overdrive. I mean, look at this. In healthy people, it only makes up about 5% of the fat in their liver. But in people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that number just skyrockets. For them, more than a quarter, a full 26% of their liver fat is made brand new, straight from the carbohydrates they're eating. So what exactly is de novo lipogenesis, or DNL? It's simply the biological pathway that our body uses to convert excess carbs into fatty acids, which then get stored away. It's the body's official instruction manual for turning things like sugar and bread into fat. To really wrap our heads around this, let's actually follow the journey of a single carbon atom. Imagine it's from a glucose molecule and something you just ate. We're going to see how it gets completely transformed into a brand new fat molecule tucked away in your liver. Okay, so the journey starts when carbs get broken down into this really important molecule called acetyl-CoA. Now, this all happens inside the cell's powerhouse, the mitochondria. But the actual fat-building factory floor, well, that's outside the mitochondria, in the main part of the cell, the cytosol. And here's the catch. Acetyl-CoA can't just walk out. The mitochondrial wall is like a locked door. So the cell has this brilliant little workaround, a molecular ferry called the citrate shuttle, that basically gives our acetyl-CoA a key to get through the door and onto the factory floor. So now our carbon atom, riding on that acetyl-CoA molecule, is out in the cytosol, and it immediately arrives at this critical checkpoint. This is where we meet the undisputed boss of fat production, the master switch, a single enzyme that basically holds the keys to the entire operation. And that master switch is an enzyme called acetyl-CoA carboxylase, or ACC for short. Its job is to perform the very first, and this is key, irreversible step. It grabs our acetyl-CoA and transforms it into a new molecule, malonyl-CoA. This step is the true bottleneck of the entire factory. It controls the speed of the whole process. And once it happens, our little carbon atom is officially committed. It is on a one-way street to becoming fat. No turning back. Now, the body is incredibly smart, right? It doesn't just have one version of this master switch. It actually has two specialized forms. Think of them as having two totally different jobs. You've got ACC1, who I like to call the builder. It works out in the cytosol, making the building blocks for new fat. Then you've got ACC2, the regulator. It hangs out on the wall of the powerhouse, the mitochondria, and its main job is to control fat burning. And just like any good switch, ACC responds to some pretty simple signals. When the cell is swimming in energy and raw materials, a molecule called citrate acts like a big green go button, turning ACC on. The hormone insulin, which your body releases after a carb-heavy meal, does the same thing. It flips the switch to on. But if energy gets low, another sensor called AMPK comes in and just slams the off switch, shutting down this whole energy-expensive process immediately. And this is where you can just see the sheer elegance of our metabolism. That malonyl-CoA molecule that ACC makes, it does more than just build fat. It also acts as a giant stop sign. It physically blocks fat from being burned for energy. This brilliant little system, this reciprocal regulation, prevents what's called a futile cycle. It makes sure the body isn't wasting a ton of energy, building fat and burning fat at the exact same time. So it's a beautifully balanced system when everything is working the way it should. But in a lot of modern diseases, this finely tuned metabolic switch can actually get stuck in the on position. And that has some really serious consequences. And here's where you can see the problem in stark relief. Remember we said this process accounts for just about 5% of fat in a healthy liver? Well, in people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that contribution absolutely explodes. It jumps more than 5 times, all the way up to 26%. The fat factory is just completely out of control, flooding the liver with newly minted fat. So why? Why does the switch get jammed like this? Well, the main culprits are things like chronically high insulin levels, what we call hyperinsulinemia, and, you guessed it, a high intake of dietary sugar. Both of these are super common in our modern world, and they mean that the on signal is just constantly being mashed. They keep that ACC master switch forced into the on position, telling the body to make fat, nonstop. And the story doesn't even stop with metabolic diseases. It turns out many types of cancer have figured out how to hijack this exact same pathway. They essentially reboot this dormant fat factory, turning it into what some scientists now call a metabolic oncogene, a pathway that literally fuels cancer's growth. See, these rapidly dividing cancer cells are desperate for new lipids to build new cell walls, so they just flip on this internal fat factory to get all the raw materials they need to multiply. But here's where the story takes a really exciting, hopeful turn. Because we now understand just how central this master switch is, modern medicine is figuring out how to hack the system. We're developing new drugs that are specifically designed to go in and manually turn this metabolic switch back to off. And the precision of these new treatments is just incredible. Scientists are creating drugs that act like highly specific wrenches designed to shut down one particular gear in this fat factory. Some drugs are designed to cut off the supply of raw materials at the very beginning. Others go right for the master switch itself, ACC, and force it into the off position. And still others block the final assembly line. These drugs are already in clinical trials, and they're showing real promise for treating everything from high cholesterol and fatty liver disease to a whole range of different cancers. All of this really leads to a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? De novo lipogenesis is an ancient survival pathway. It was designed to help us store energy when food was abundant so we could survive when it was scarce. But now we live in an age of constant abundance, and that same survival mechanism has become a driver of disease. So as we get better and better at hacking these fundamental biological switches, you have to wonder, could we be on the verge of finally being able to switch off some of our most challenging modern illnesses?